Honorable Chairperson, my first question is, why is this bill needed? It is needed because on the night of 8th November, the government, or rather the Prime Minister, in a 48-minute address, unilaterally and unnecessarily announced that 500 rupee and 1000 rupee notes amounting to rupees 14 lakh crore, which is 86.4% of all the currency in circulation in India, would be illegal as of midnight. In fact, 3 hours is what he gave our country to pull 86% of the country's money out of circulation, and this in a country where cash has represented 98% of all transactions by volume. Mr. Premachandran has already described why he thinks this is illegal. Within days, the real result of the Modi announcement became apparent: the severe disruption of normal economic activity. Since over 90% of the financial transactions are made in cash and over 85% of the workers in our country are paid in cash, the everyday economy was ground to a standstill in the last 2 months of the year. The government wants to get credit for its bold move, but what an inept implementation it was, Mr. Chairman. It made a mockery of the initial shock and awe with which the announcement was greeted. The appalling lack of elementary planning unleashed anarchy on the economy and created insecurity and anxiety amongst people. Since enough new currency had not been printed, the banks did not have even a fraction of what was enough to meet the consumer demand for new notes. They did not have the new notes, and so they restricted withdrawals to small amounts of cash that were insufficient for most people. This is also illegal, Mr. Chairman, though my friend Mr. Premachandran did not mention it. My question is, under which provision of the law can an Indian citizen be denied access to his own account? Can the finance minister name one country in the world that disallows people from withdrawing money from their own bank accounts? It is clearly a mask, Mr. Chairman, for the government's inefficiency in not printing enough notes. 30 days after the Prime Minister's speech, only 30% of the currency in circulation had been restored. The RBI told the Public Accounts Committee on January 18 that it was up to 60%. The SBI estimates that it may go up to 70% by the end of February. The Economic Survey claims it will all be back by the end of March. But I do not think so, because the rate of printing of 500 rupee notes has been falling well below the target, and going by the rate at which the printing presses are functioning, I suspect it will take another 5 or 6 months to remonetize the entire banking system. Anyway, whenever that cash system is fully restored, it is very clear that the Prime Minister's "bear with me for 50 days" was yet another jumla. There is even more inefficiency than that. When the government started printing notes, it did not print enough quantity of the smaller notes. So we were lucky enough to get a 2000 rupee note, but no one could give us change for it. And even more inefficiency is with the ATMs. It never occurred to the government to realize that if you want to put the new notes into the existing ATMs, they should be the same size as the old notes. They made them into a different size and they would not fit into the ATMs, and then they had to scramble to hire 50,000 engineers across the banking system to recalibrate the ATMs. More seriously, Mr. Chairman, the lack of cash reduced both the consumption and the demand. I feel sorry for my friend Mr. Finance Minister, because he was proud, and rightly so, that we were briefly the fastest growing economy in the world. Now we can no longer say that, because a booming economy that boasted the highest growth rates in the world has suddenly become a cash scarce economy, and the result was that the production went down in all sectors. Small producers could not get working capital. Some businesses even have had to shut down. Many daily wage workers, who are of course a majority of the labor force in our country, lost their jobs because firms did not have the cash to pay them. The economic survey published by the Finance Ministry itself states that demonetization is an aggregate demand shock, an aggregate supply shock, an uncertainty shock, and a liquidity shock. It says the cash crunch must have affected the informal economy. The informal economy accounts for nearly half the overall GDP and 80% of the employment economy, and inevitably it runs on cash. Unemployment has now shot up to a 5-year high. According to the All India Manufacturers Organization, micro and small scale industries and traders have incurred 60% job losses and 47% revenue losses because of demonetization. Not only are the SMEs shutting down, according to AIMO, medium and large infrastructure companies which they have surveyed have reported a 35% drop in employment and 45% drop in revenues. AIMO estimates even higher losses of jobs and revenue as of the end of March. Real estate, construction and infrastructure, which provide the maximum employment in our country after agriculture, are set to lose over 1 lakh jobs over the next year. The construction industry, which is worth rupees 8 lakh crore and which employs 4.5 crore people, has virtually ground to a halt with a drop of 80 to 90% in revenues. There has even been an inventory pile up because, of course, there is no consumer demand. Honorable Chairperson, please have a look at the indicators of the economy. Sales, cash flow, traders' income, production and employment were all down in the months of November and December of 2016. That is why our former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh estimated that the GDP of our country will shrink by 1 to 2% for the fiscal year. Local industries like footwear in Agra, garments in Tirupur, rubber in Kerala and transport everywhere absolutely slowed down, and in many cases work had to be suspended for lack of money. The informal financial sector, including the rural money lenders who provide loan amount for 40% of our total lending, has almost collapsed. In fact, the rural India is in bad shape. The fishing industry, depending entirely on cash sales of freshly caught fish, is deeply affected. This is even affecting coastal security, as I pointed out during the question hour this morning. The number of boats going out to sea has been severely reduced because of demonetization, and we have fewer eyes and ears looking for suspicious activities in our maritime waters. Traders are losing perishable stocks. Farmers are dumping their produce. There was another question today in the question hour about that. In fact, there has been a study by economists at the Indira Gandhi Institute for Development Research, which in late November established that the deliveries of rice to rural wholesale mandis were 61% below usual levels. Soybeans were down by 77%. Maize was down by 30%. The winter crop could not be sown on time because no one had cash for seeds, and therefore the harvest may well be 25% lower. As I said, Honorable Chairperson, we have another crisis when it comes to my own state of Kerala, because rural banking has been severely affected. The distinct character of our rural banking sector is the major role of the cooperative sector, particularly primary cooperative societies, which are much more vibrant in Kerala than any elsewhere. It is because over 70% of the deposits in primary agriculture cooperatives in India come from Kerala. Over 70% of the non-agricultural loans and advances made in India are in Kerala. Over 15% of the agricultural loans and advances in India are disbursed in Kerala. But the Reserve Bank of India prevented all the 370 central district cooperative banks and 93,000 primary agriculture credit societies in the country from depositing or converting old notes after November 8th. And the result has been particularly damaging for my state. I want to say that it is not just the question of one state, but it shows certain thoughtlessness towards the realities of our rural economy. Dairy, agriculture, and, as I said, fishing have all been severely affected. Tourism may not seem very important to some people, but for us in Kerala, it is a huge contributor to our GDP. It is also vital for employment across the country, but foreigners were given a lot of inconvenience because of demonetization. Tourists were returning from Agra without seeing the Taj because their notes were not accepted at the ticket window. Travel plans had to be curtailed. Tourism prevails by word of mouth. How will you bring back the trust of foreigners who spread the word of their harrowing ordeals in demonetizing India? The economic survey has already lowered the growth rate projection to 6.5%. The IMF has come down from 7.6 to 6.6%. The CMIE says it will be only 6% for the next 5 years. I know the finance minister has made a lot of claims about India's growth. I would say he and the prime minister have belied the expectations of the people of India.